Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Good Fight-ers podcast. Dr. Nash and Dr. coming at you live with Dr. Gates Mayer from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and very, very special guest today, Dr. Nathan Gerowitz, with a whole lot of connection, intention, and purpose. So today we got like I said before, really
got an extra dose.
Oh, an extra dose, yes. Really excited about this today. Dr. Nathan, I've mentioned him in the past, but he's one of my greatest, I would say, influences I've had in my life, especially through chiropractic school and through my journey and my path towards bettering myself. He was there from the beginning, and he's been at every MLS seminar I've had the opportunity of working in. And, he's been somebody that has been instrumental for me in my life and just really trying to develop my skills and helping people along their path too. So Dr. Gates and I were kind of talking before, Dr. Nathan, and one theme that we know is pretty common with guests is just like asking them about their story and asking them about where they've come from. And really, we wanted to make this a little bit different. So we were wanting to know. So we know we've established where you've been coming from, but where do you see yourself moving towards, and what's your story look like in the years to come?
Take us into the mind of Dr. Nathan.
Oh boy, there's all kinds of twists and cul-de-sacs up there. So I love the question, because if at a certain point, if you're on enough podcasts, you eventually we always start with the story. So I like that we're starting differently today. That's cool. So moving into the future, I opened my practice a couple of years ago, so it's starting to really grow, especially in the last year or so. One of the great gifts that happened in the last year is so many people are more aware of their health and how valuable and vital that is, and how it affects everything we know, everything we do, everyone that we interact with, and everyone we know. And what I think part of what happened last year is that everyone got really tired of just playing defense with their health in terms of only trying to prevent something, whereas I see people really starting to be more proactive with what they want to do and what they want to accomplish for themselves, that they're getting to the point where that you kind of need to get to for a major breakthrough of, this can't just be it. There's got to be something more going on. So in my practice, continuing to serve people, as we call it in MLS, the exceptional chiropractic experience, and to really help people to heal, to grow, to thrive. And I'm in my hometown. I practice about a mile from my high school, which is really cool, really strange at the same time, having lived all over the country between those two experiences. But so there's that end of things. With regards to how I serve with regards to MLS, which is, for anyone listening who may not be familiar with it, it's a chiropractic approach. It's really an approach to life that we just apply to chiropractic, all about doing everything from a place of peace and ease, rather than trying to force, whether it's someone's body or force life into a particular way. How do you flow with life and create more peace and ease, both in the body, in the neurospinal system, and in life in general, both for you and the people that we take care of, that all three of us take care of. And we continued to do programs last year that were fantastic and amazing and really transformative for people. So we are continuously growing to find, how do we take this opportunity for more chiropractors and chiropractic students around the world and around the country, because we've been at it since 1983. We've got it really dialed in. When people come to our programs, we can actually pretty much know at what point in the seminar people are going to break through on different things and different aspects. It's a lot like popcorn. Some pop early, some pop middle, most pop in the middle, some pop late, some don't pop at all, and that's perfectly fine. But regardless, everyone leaves with a higher skill set, both in the way that they serve people and the way they connect to themselves, which I'm happy to get into more if you guys would like. The third thing is that there's another work that I do called quickening, which is all about rewriting belief systems. Because just like we have a cardiovascular system, we've got a respiratory system, we've got a muscular system, all have belief systems. And they're as powerful, if not more so, than all the others, because they can override what's going on in our physical systems, if that makes some sense. And I can get into more of that. And it also gets into what I would consider metaphysical and esoteric foundation for being human. Because there's a lot of aspects about being a human that were really not talked about, or they're really glossed over in most people's experience. And we go into them in depth and make it so much more comfortable to be both a finite human in this meat spacesuit walking around and connect to our divine essence. So starting to take those more and more to more people. I learned that work from Susan Rossi, who's an amazing chiropractor in Georgia, and esoteric, metaphysical teacher, shamanic teacher. And so we're going to be taking that more and more now that people can travel again. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
And I'm very excited about what can come next, because there's been the last year has been a lot of really intense stillness, which is extremely important for growth. You can't have unadulterated growth. You don't find that in nature, or you do, but it's called cancer. So there has to be an active component and a relaxed component. There has to be processing and integrating, yin and yang. Just the world of duality we live in. And I'm a big fan of the Dalai Lama, and he one of his quotes that I love is, "You have to learn the rules so you can break them effectively."
True.
Yeah.
Do you find that growth will be more exponential now after that stillness?
I think so. And that's what I've seen for people that I take care of. I think part of it is that, and I joke all the time, last year we all had this amazing opportunity to get really quiet with ourselves and just be still and really access a little bit more of the feminine aspect of who we all are. Because whether we're men or women or anywhere on that spectrum, we all have masculine and feminine energy. Feminine is all about stillness. And most people, I joke, when they had this opportunity to really take inventory and find out what is it that they were doing in their life and was it working for them, they learned how to make sourdough bread, and which is a wonderful pastime and delicious. And whether people were aware of it or not, that's what was happening last year. And so because of that, there's a greater sense of what's possible that I see, whether people are consciously aware of it or not. I became a big fan of Brandi Carlile in the last couple months. She's a Americana folk singer, and I listened to her, and in her book that just came out, the last chapter she wrote last year. So it was during the shutdowns, during the global dance that we were all doing. And she said, the next time we find ourselves on stage, we'll all remember who we are, and so will you, which is stardust without any meteors striking us. So I think a lot of people are starting to remember, consciously or unconsciously, their nature of this stardust of being human divines and divine humans all at the same time. I know I just got really metaphysical, so we can bring it back more grounded if y'all would.
No, we love jumping into that right off the bat.
Microcosm in the macrocosm, right?
Absolutely.
I love it. So building with the stillness you've been helping people cultivate, right? Because that's what a lot of it, a lot of the process has to be, is I would assume helping people understand that this year of stillness is something like a silver lining, right? It's like a springboard for them to continually adapt and grow. Go ahead. I was going to say, what are some of the steps that you have been seeing people have to overcome with that?
That's a great question. And I definitely agree with you. It's absolutely a silver lining or a springboard. And what I've told people is that we're not for the horrible loss of life in the last year. This was an amazing gift. And there are still gifts within, and there was this unfortunate, terrible loss of life that happened, which I'm not denying in any sense of the word. And there is that process of what I call inner mastery. I used to call it inner work, but I much prefer calling it inner mastery, because it's working on the different parts of ourselves. And one of the main components that people are unaware of, that I'd love to dive in with you guys for a moment, is what's called shadow processing. Because I'm making an assumption, and I know I shouldn't, but I'm doing it anyway, which is that probably most people who listen to your podcast are familiar with the term being a light worker, or that we work with the light, or we're a warrior for the light, that kind of idea. Am I decently accurate? Or
they could get on board with that for sure.
Alrighty, cool. So good. I'm glad we're on the same page. So there's we live in a world of duality. It's one of the 7 things that make the human experience what it is, so unique amongst all the experiences out there. And so there's light and there's shadow. We absolutely need them both. What happens is, when I say shadow, I'm partially using how Carl Jung referred to it. He's a psychologist who kind of pioneered the term in mass consciousness, which is the unconscious belief systems, concepts, thought forms about who we are, how we operate, how life is, and that we filter our experience through. Another way of looking at it is the disassociated pieces of ourselves. The pieces of ourselves that, due to trauma, injury, overwhelm, stress, whether physically, chemically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, or in the case of 2020, all of them at once, we can fracture, if that makes sense. And so shadow processing is the process of calling those pieces home and rewriting all those belief systems and those concepts. So what happens is, you go to an amazing experience. Someone comes into either of your offices and I'll use the term we all like to use, we light them up. And we help them really experience how amazing their body is and what a sacred thing it can be. Or you go to a seminar, or you hear an amazing sermon, you do a meditation retreat, you walk in nature, you go to a concert, something that really pulls light into your being. The gift of that is that it will flush up shadow. And just like you might be able to see the shadow on the wall behind me, the amount of shadow is proportionate to the light that is pulled in. So that pulls up that shadow, which means we then get to process it, integrate it, or in other words, bring it home to ourselves, and that's the gift. When that happens, it can be a little dramatic, potentially, if you work off that. If you live in a paradigm where growth has to be dramatic, traumatic, and full of pain and stress. I would invite you and all your listeners, you don't have to live in that paradigm anymore. It can be safe, gentle, and easy. And then what happens is, as we process and integrate all that shadow, we expand. So we can hold more light. So more light comes in, more shadow flushes up, and we do the dance again. And that's shadow processing. That's shadow dancing. And it's talked about in many different cultures, whether Native American or Buddhist traditions. Many of the Eastern traditions talk about it. It just so happens that in the West, we don't talk about it an exceptional amount. And so that's what was happening for a lot of people last year. Part of the reason that everyone seemed so terrified last year, and I lovingly joke, I'm confident the Pope and the Dalai Lama had some stress last year because it was intense. Part of it is everything we were experiencing at the current time. Part of it is that we have what's called cellular memory and disassociated pieces and genetic memory of previous pandemics, shutdowns, and then you layer on the fact that halfway through the year, one of the major things we were all processing was the inequality issues. I'll just loosely term them issues that we have in this country, which is a huge, long history. And so if you're open to entertain the idea that we've been around the block more than just one lifetime, we've got shadow from those lifetimes. We also have genetic memory. We have things that will hang out in our electromagnetic field from our lineage. So it was a lot going on. And so and I go into this in the book that just came out. There are a couple steps that everyone can take, because I like to give people practical things to do. A 3-step process to allow this to be much more gentle is: don't take it personally, don't judge it, and stay in present time. So the act of not taking it personally. Here's my analogy for taking it personally. We all have that itchy sweater we got from some great aunt for Christmas, and we'll wash it and then we'll go to put it away. And as we're putting our laundry away, it can be very easy to go, "Oh, that's my itchy red sweater. I'll take off this shirt, put it on, and feel how itchy it is." Versus just going, "No, that's mine. That's my itchy red sweater. I'm going to hang it up and put it in the closet and and then I'm done with it." What happens is, when we are processing the shadow, it's very easy for us to think it's happening right now, which is where that staying in present time comes in, which I'll come back to in a minute. We'll put a pin on that. Then there's also the issue of not judging it. Oftentimes, and I know I've experienced this, you guys have probably experienced this, something will happen in your life and I'm going to use a word that I don't particularly love, but I need a better word. It'll almost trigger you, or it'll make you get upset, emotion, some sort of a wave of emotion will happen. And you're like, may I use a cuss word?
Yeah.
Shit, I thought I was done with this. I thought I had fully handled this. My opinion, it's a spiral. We always come back around to things that we thought we'd handled just to get deeper gift out of them. But what happens is we judge that, oh, I shouldn't have to deal with this, or this isn't right. This is horrible. Whereas now it just is. And then the last one is to stay in present time. This is one of the ways that chiropractic is really vital to in what I'm describing, the shadow dancing process is the dance of enlightenment. It's how you can become enlightened on the planet. It's part of the reason that chiropractic is so vital to it. Because a chiropractic adjustment, when delivered peacefully, honoringly, and still with a deep and powerful application, will pull people into present time. And you and I, the three of us must see it all day long, where people get up off the table and they're just like, I am, like, you have the look in their eyes where like they're here. They are fully here in body, in the present moment. They're with us.
Yep.
They're not stuck in the sensations or experiences they were living in. They're here. So that's part of, and I'll come back to more if you guys want about how chiropractic facilitates this dance. But so those three things can be vital of don't take it personally, don't judge it, stay in present time. Or in other words, allow it to be, stay consciously detached, and stay in present time. Does that make sense?
No. Yeah, that was awesome. I love that I think so many times, especially that last portion when you adjust somebody and they kind of just sit there for a second. And initially, as a student, especially, you might be thinking, oh, they're lightheaded. Oh, they're like still taking into account the adjustment. But it could, many times we do see it, them actually becoming more present with themselves, the self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've never thought about before, but it didn't click before, I guess. But I love the idea of that, of them just coming back and bringing in those pieces, bringing in those portions of them that makes them who they're supposed to be and who they actually are, and not who they either become or who the world wants them to be.
Yeah.
I love that concept.
And Nash was talking about the stillness that happens. That's, I think, part of the gift of getting adjusted, whether they are on the table for 60 seconds or whether they are on the table for 45 minutes, that it's giving them an opportunity to just be with themselves. And what I often, people come in and they will tell me, I am such a mess. And what I will tell them, sometimes on the first visit, sometimes later, is no, we're going to make this mess that you're currently living in your message of healing and health and transformation that can happen. And that stillness that can be cultivated both internally and outwardly, that's, in each of our offices, gives them the opportunity, gives their body the opportunity to finish the learning process of whatever experience got stuck in the neurospinal system, got stuck and wasn't able to fully move through. So it takes what we do rather than a restorative trying to fix people model into much more of a healing and growth model of how do I help you get better and better and better and better? Because you can't take in my opinion, we can't go backwards in our lives. Time continues to, time's an illusion, but it's the illusion we've all agreed to. So we're moving forward with it. Yeah. And so it's a matter of how do we use everything that you just experienced that may have been incredibly traumatic, dramatic, stressful, or injurious, and make it a rocket fuel for what your life can be. But it takes a certain level of dedication to mastery of skills to be able to do that.
Right.
So when you were talking about, being somewhat, I don't want to call it broken apart because that's not the right, that's not even the image I'm really thinking about, but, people associating with all these, have you seen the movie Split?
I haven't, but I've seen enough clips of it. So,
okay. So essentially, in one person, he's got 36 different personalities living with him.
Sure,
I think to some extent, that's a component that a lot of people are having to deal with, at least in our day and age, with so much technology being in their face all the time, where I think there's a bit of a identity crisis sometimes that people have to try to digest, that they're identifying with so many different things and having the feeling that they gotta express that, right? And they feel almost super scattered. And I think that with that stillness, that's almost, this last year, that was like a almost overwhelming stillness for a lot of people. So, what you were saying is like creating that space for them to be able to digest that and integrate that, to, bring that all together and really hold that space for them to come together. Man, beautiful.
And when you say, go ahead, Gates. All right.
I was just going to say, do you kind of view yourself in that moment as somebody who's giving that adjustment as almost being, I don't know, there's three different things that kind of come to mind, either being a magnet to help them draw that back in, or do you see yourself as maybe a conduit or a lighthouse to help that happen? Or what's that intention that you kind of have in your mindset as that process is taking place? If you can dive into that.
Absolutely. So it's funny you said lighthouse, because last year, and Nash, you were probably at some of the seminars where I said this, where I was talking to people, and they were, my analogy for myself last year, because especially in March, April, it got a little rough for everybody. No one knew what tomorrow was going to happen, which not that we ever really do, but it got very apparent that we had no idea. We were all flying by the seat of our pants.
We knew there was no toilet paper, and that was about it.
Right. We knew that would be the currency.
Right.
No, invest in Charmin. What the analogy that I came up for myself was that the waves were getting really rocky, and most people were getting thrashed about by the waves. Some were learning how to surf. I chose to make my office and me and my being as best as possible a lighthouse. So that's the analogy. I like that. Really enjoy that analogy. I view it as that I'm facilitating the process of healing. That is a natural process that is everyone's birthright. And using the skill set that I have and the presence that I can bring to it, the greater amount of space I can hold will allow that to happen much more spontaneously. And so part of it is a conscious intention I set, and part of it is a state of being. That when you just get you guys have both probably experienced this, when you get around certain people, you just feel yourself go, oh, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Where you find yourself almost like you entrain to them. For anyone who's not familiar with the term entrain or entrainment, if you put a bunch of clocks in a room together, they will all sync up. It's also the principle of any women who are listening to this show, anyone who is either has menstruated or lived with women or people who menstruate, you know that you know exactly what I'm talking about, because if you get a group of women who are menstruating living together, you get a group of people menstruating together, they will sync up together and their cycles will all align. Now, the interesting thing is they'll all align to whoever the alpha is in the group, but that's a topic for another day. So it's also the same principle of how ducks and geese can migrate. They're able to entrain to another. It's the way that biological rhythms sync up. So I do my best to hold my space to be as grounded, centered, connected to source, and open-hearted as possible. And I allow people to entrain to that. So it's not always something that I have to say. It's more a state of being that I do my best to hold. And my best varies, every minute by minute, day by day. For example, last week on Thursday, I had a massive headache because we gave up sugar last week. And I was going through withdrawals. So, that it was still profound experience healing for everyone. And I did my best given those circumstances. Does that make a little bit of sense to your question?
Definitely. That was awesome.
We've talked about before on a few episodes beforehand. We didn't call it entrainment, but it's amazing how just universal intelligence in general seeks some sort of balance, right? And some sort of equilibrium, where when you're around those people who you're on the same frequency with, that you just seem to I don't know what it's called in music, but when you have, it's just like a G note matches the same G note on a different instrument, right? So I love that. That's awesome.
And anyone who's an athlete knows exactly what I'm talking about, because if you played any sort of team sport, or even if you've done individual sports that involve like a relay race, or whether swimming or running, or team sports, there's a moment that can happen where everyone syncs up. No one has to look at each other. Everyone just knows exactly what the other one's doing, and it's working as one unit. And that's that's the same principle. So it's something that everyone is aware of, just not everyone has heard the words to describe it for. Just like the word integrate that we've been using constantly, the easiest way I define it is it's the process, it's coming home to oneself. And the more that happens, the more comfortable people can become with themselves. And oftentimes that leads to phenomenal physiological healing, and it can lead to amazing deep core healing as well.
What do you see as the biggest interference of that in today's age? What do you see as the biggest interference to that in today's age?
Oh, that's a good question.
Sorry.
No, it's a very big question. It's an important question. So there's several different ones of it, but one of the first things that is coming to mind is we have all exceptionally bought into the illusion of separation. Meaning, and we can get into the physical technology, and which, for the record, can be used very powerfully. It's just a tool. While we're doing this across, I think,
a megaphone.
3 different states we're having this podcast. So, and the funny part is it's all silicone, so it's crystal magic. But I think one of the biggest things is that part of the dance of being human is we showed up to play a game where the divine wanted to see what it's like to be separated. So it created a game, and humans were the ones that went, okay, let's play the game. So we're an aspect of the divine, experiencing separation, learning to transcend it. Does that make a little bit of sense how I'm phrasing it?
Yeah, and almost like not experiencing self-awareness, but like experimenting with self-awareness, right? Or like different levels of it.
Yeah, because at one and it's all a matter of perspective. So from one perspective, like who I am stops right here on my skin. From an emotional standpoint, you can feel someone's emotions from across the room. Right. If either of you guys are in romantic relationships, I know, Nash, I know you are. You get home and your partner is upset about something. Even if you can't physically see her, you walk in the door, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So do I.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so our emotions can carry weight. Our mental capacities in the world of our mind, we have so much flexibility. The tricky part is disciplining it for most of us. Then there's the aspect of our personality, or our ego, which from my perspective, an ego is not a bad thing. If we weren't supposed to have them, we wouldn't have them. It's a matter of disciplining it and cultivating and disciplining it. So it's not overly humble or overly arrogant. They're the flip side of the same coin. Because our personality, our ego is what allows us to wield power. Those are all the finite components of ourselves. Those are the parts that at some point we may choose to drop these bodies, and those are the parts that will go away. Then there's our soul and our spirit, and there's different levels within there. And then there's what I call the infinite, incorruptible, unconditional divine source, or universal intelligence, or the universe, or God, or Cookie Monster, whatever word tickles your fancy. From those different perspectives, it's all just a rising and falling of phenomenon and an experiencing of different lessons, gifts, and the human experiment. So part of what it is we as a culture, in my opinion, have over-indexed on the finite components of ourselves. Meaning we've over-indexed on our personality and our ego, and part of the function of our personality and ego is to separate things. Same with our mind. And emotionally, most of us are exceptionally stunted in our growth. Physically, I'm 30 years old. Emotionally, I have worked I put a lot of inner mastery hours into building my emotional body so it's the same age that I am. Whereas most people out there, not through any specific fault of their own, it has to do with the culture and the horizontal perspective we live in. They are about 2 years old. They throw tantrums. And for the record, I occasionally do too. Usually involving the Chicago Bears.
True.
So it's just a matter of learning to cultivate and grow each of those different aspects of ourselves. And I think part of it is allowing ourselves to believe how amazing and powerful and divine we actually are, and that we are all children of the divine, not just a few select people. Then, and anything else that I think a lot of the other things that we could talk about, whether it's the way we eat, whether it's the way we live, living exceptionally disconnected from nature and the rhythms of our body, whether it's the way we feed ourselves, whether it's the technology we use, are different reflections of that. And I think part of it is, the pendulum has swung so far into the mental realm, but it's starting to swing itself back. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with mental processes. The prospects of the advancements of science and technology allow us to do this podcast, allow lots of amazing things to happen, and allowing us to know, yeah, there's also some other stuff out there. There's other aspects of who we are that I think, it doesn't take long. You talk to someone who is a war veteran, they've lost a limb. Are they less of a person because they don't have a leg or an arm? No, of course not. They're still a whole human. So it's just a matter. So it becomes very quick. It doesn't take long for people to realize, oh, I'm actually more than just my physical body. That this is my spacesuit or my vehicle, or the way I like to view it is, this is my pet. It showed up for me to house me. It's doing a phenomenal sacred service for me. And how do I take care of it like I take care of my dog Millie? Most people take better care of their pets than they do their actual.
Yeah, big time.
And part of the reason it's so important to take care of our physical animal, and this is where chiropractic comes in really importantly, is because we came here for physical. We came here to have the physical experience. And if we want miracles to happen in our lives, we have to be here to receive them. It's like ordering something from Amazon and moving. You have to actually be there to get it. And so that's where the process of embodying yourself fully and making this a sacred vehicle with which to experience life becomes really critical and really fun.
Real quick, Doc. So we do have 5 minutes left on this recording. So what I'm going to try and do is, if we drop out, I'm going to try and just get real quick and do another one. So it'll be like a little two-parter. But
so we can all drink some water and breathe. Got it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Soak it in.
Yeah. So one quote I was reading this morning was that, so the ego loves complexity and the soul loves simplicity.
Ooh, I like that.
And, just kind of going back around to what you were talking about with, how much we've been leaning into that recently with just technology and just overall lifestyle, making it more complex, that we need to add more things to make our life more fulfilling, right? When in all actuality, if we were to get more simple and remove most things, we would find life is so much more meaningful, fulfilling, and we would get so much more out of it, right?
I like that idea. I'm good with that idea.
Well, and that's what we work with a lot, right? Is just removing that interference, but also trying to find what's going to release the most life and helping that whoever's in front of us in the best way, shape, or form, whether that be through a physical embodiment of reception or even right when they walk through the door with whatever sounds or visual ambiance that might be there for that person walking in.
Well, you see a lot more success in that too. You see a lot more people that are able to reach what they, like you said, in fulfillment, but also reach what they set out to do. I don't know about you guys, but I always find it funny when people come into your office and like, what can I do for this? What can I do for that? And I always ask them, well, let's take a step back and see what we can take away first before we even try to add anything into the mix ever. And once they recognize that simplicity, it's just time to see what happens.
Yeah, and for the record, I don't necessarily go through this TED Talk version of everything that can happen with an adjustment. I keep it exceptionally simple. In my office, I tell people, the way I explain it is, your body's really smart. It knows what to do. It's very easy, especially if they're parents, because it's like they know that bodies can create new bodies. Or even kids. I ask them, have you ever had a friend who broke a bone? Yeah, they put it, and most of them will say yes. I say, great. You know how they put it in a cast and the bone put itself back together? Yeah, your body's really smart. It knows how to do that. So we just got to, sometimes it just gets pulled out of balance. So what the adjusting process does, the process in a chiropractic office, is it cultivates and creates more balance, harmony, and connection. And people are like, I like where we're going with that. Or the other question I think is important for all of us to consider is, where does healing come from, inside of us or outside of us? And I ask that to people all the time in my office. And I rarely have anyone say that it comes from outside of us. Almost everyone agrees, or everyone is in agreement that it comes from inside of us. And to which I say, fantastic. Let's just make sure that all of those channels are open and as clear as possible, and make sure everything's in balance. And when you need those certain circumstances, but life is always aiming to thrive. Your body's always working to first it'll work to survive. That's its bare minimum. That's where a lot of the blockages or interferences that we all help clear out of the clear in the system come from, is the body working to survive. But it can also access different programs. We can allow it a software upgrade. The operating system can be upgraded from survival to healing, growth, thrival, connection. And in each of those, there's amazing gifts that can happen, and a much greater physiological ease and function, whether that is someone actually being able to dress themselves without needing help, or take out the garbage by themselves, or be able to focus in school and be able to, as a third grader, actually be able to do their work and then have so much fun playing at recess. So it's just a matter of,
big idea, right? Like what BJ always wrote about as well with, it's really easy to get stuck in the concepts for that one man, having to deal with, like you said, just putting your shoes on, right? And putting your shoes on for that one person might be a little thing, but like if he can't do that, that's a big deal.
Yeah. There was a moment last year where I was getting really, I was just feeling all the emotions of everything last year, because there was a lot going on. And I watched a movie called Jojo Rabbit, which I highly recommend if you guys haven't seen it. And at one point, one of the characters looks at themselves in the mirror and says, today, just do what you can. And so part of it is for me focusing intently on who is in front of me and what can I do and what can they receive, and not shoving it down their throat fundamentally or dogmatically. Just opening up the possibility as I am also helping their body be more safe, so it can then learn, so it can then access more of that joy and wisdom that's available. It's a fun way to make a living.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Cool. Okay.
Sorry, good fighters. We cut out there for a quick second. But like I said, we got double dose, extra dose, connection, intention, and purpose.
One other, I don't mean to just segue, because I know we were moving really good there, but one portion we always love to ask whenever we have a guest is, we love to ask about connection, intention, and purpose.
Sure.
And just kind of where that, even those words, what they mean to you, or also where you may be really emphasize those with not just your life, but also maybe like in your practice, and if you could just kind of share with those how you interpret those words for us.
Sure. So I am a big fan of Simon Sinek's work. If anyone's not familiar, he is someone he started off in marketing, interestingly enough, and he found how certain leaders, certain people, and certain movements and companies speak differently and connect differently than other companies. It comes back to why people have such brand loyalty to Apple, because for decades they promoted themselves incredibly differently, because they always came from their why, which you could consider synonymous with purpose, which is everyone has a why or a purpose of what it is that they do. And in my opinion, it is, once you can delineate it and look at it and read it and refine it, it becomes a really great filter to be able to determine what actions are most appropriate for me to take. What, and that can be as simple as, which jar of peanut butter do I buy in the grocery store? This one is organic and doesn't have any added sugar and is made from nuts that played Beethoven out on the farm. And this is one of, the wholesale brand that is full of crap, but it's $4 cheaper. But again, how am I feel? So is it congruent or not congruent? Because the more things we do that are out of integrity with ourselves and the less congruency we have, the more chaos is going to ensue. And it's kind of back to the same thing I said before of where does health and healing come from, inside of us or outside of us? If you are of the belief that it comes from within us, then it's a matter of what are we doing to cultivate that. And to be fair, I do enjoy chocolate cake on occasion. It's not a matter of denying yourself some of the fun parts of life, but it's acknowledging, where am I putting my energy? Where am I putting my focus? So I think if you can delineate your purpose, mission, and vision, and for some people, just being able to delineate, what is the why I do what I do? What is the purpose behind what I do what I do? It also, for anyone who is a entrepreneur or in the service industry, it makes it so much easier to separate yourself from the hundreds of, I'm down the street from National College or National University of Health Sciences. So there's another chiropractic school down the road from me. So there's hundreds of chiropractors. I have some people who come from an hour away and they might drive past 100 other chiropractors. I choose to think that part of it is because of how I express who I am and the purpose behind what I do. And then with regards to intention is just like anything else, it's a skill that can be cultivated. It physiologically and energetically comes off of our third chakra, which is sorry, I'll move my mic, right here under our solar plexus. Back to the idea that we might be a little more than just our physical body, but that our solar plexus, the neurological plexus in there, is the physiological representation of that. So we have will and we have intention. And it used to be that it used to be very hard for people to hold will and hold intention. That's why you had things like vows come up, or you had different instruments of intention. I remember when I was a kid, people would be like, let's be blood brothers. And they'd like prick their fingers and put the blood together. And I always thought it was gross, so I didn't do it. But I think intuitively, I just knew we're beyond such. We don't have to do that anymore. Whether it's a vow or a pledge, we can, but it's a matter to do it consciously. But that's again a topic for another day, because a lot of us have vows.
Part 3, maybe.
Yeah, part 3. Yeah, the triple dose. The triple IPA for the good fighter. So intention, when we set our intention, the more we do it, the more we're able to access that ability and that power within ourselves to make things happen, to manifest our reality. Each one of us is in the constant process of co-creating our reality. Part of that's with the other people in our lives, part of that's with the divine, and part of that is based on different concepts and beliefs we are filtering our lives through. So if I set the intention that X, Y, or Z is going to happen, it's allowing the universe to work for me. One of the most important components is to let go of how it comes to pass. Meaning let go of the attachment to needing to control it all. So it's essentially I do my part. I set the intention. I hold space for it. I allow myself to let go of how it comes to pass, and then I let the divine do its job. Does that make sense? Rather than the more I feel a need to control, the more I'm trying to do God's job for it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
It can do its job. I'll do my job. Does that make some sense? A little bit?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I don't know. I feel like it's a point of emphasis that somewhere along a lot of chiropractors' journeys is that that real understanding that we aren't healing anybody, right? Like that always comes from within. So really understanding. I mean, just like being able to comprehend that concept, that like being able to let go of outcomes, because it really is out of your hands.
We don't know what it's going to look like. It can look different for everyone.
Right.
And for some people, that is miraculous physiological healing. For others, it looks like them not being as attached in themselves to how their body is functioning. And for most people, it's both. And that's the thing, is that because our body, the life within us is always working to heal and to grow and to thrive, it allows, the work that we all three do, and a lot of other practitioners do when in chiropractic and outside of chiropractic, is to help guide that, help facilitate that process. With regards to connection, I think something that I talk about, I talk about this in the boundaries class I teach, which is that there's 3 components of connection. There's me, there's whomever or whatever I'm connecting to. So any chiropractic students listening, this is going to help with finals. So there's me, there's whomever or whatever I'm connecting to, and there's the divine. So what I do, and what I teach people how to do, is to connect from my soul to the divine, to the soul of the other person or the other thing, and then back to myself. So it creates a trinity. What will happen, especially in relationships, whether that is romantic or otherwise, romantic, familial, friendships, any form of relationship, and including from doctor to patient, from facilitator to recipient, what can happen is when you forget when you exclude the divine from that process, it becomes a tug of war for energy. It becomes a tug of war for attention and awareness and energy. And people will start having conflict. And whoever feels like they won is the one who got the energy. Whereas when I'm connected to someone, like right now, I'm consciously connected to the two of you, and the divine is the one fueling this. I get to be the mouthpiece. It's a fun little hobby of mine. And I'm not trying to, there's no conflict here. It has just flown. From my perspective, it was just a very simple flow that we've been sharing so far. So it's just a matter of being aware of that, and that's something that I can teach. But that's again another day. That's the quadruple dose.
Add on always.
Yeah.
That double cask IPA. Right?
Single malt.
I'm teaching a boundaries class somewhere in August, so I'll let you guys know when if you want to
come.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
So
I love the way that you dove into that. Real quick.
Go for it.
No, I just wanted to say that.
Nash, don't interrupt him. He's complimenting me.
It's a habit I seem to have honed in pretty well. So, talking about boundaries, right? I think that's a really important aspect that a lot of people struggle with is establishing healthy boundaries.
Yes.
Whether that be in healing, or whether that be in relationships, or whether that even just be with yourself, and giving yourself some grace. That I think a lot of people feel guilty with some of the boundaries that they have for certain things.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that
they reach this point where they're like, oh, well, I've already crossed that boundary, and there's just no turning back. Is that something that you see a lot in those boundary classes, or?
Thinking there's not as much with that last part, but with everything else, yes. And even then with sometimes, yeah, but it's a matter, some of it's a matter of having, with that last point is the agreements that we have with other people. Mm-hmm. And we all have a code that we carry around. If you've ever seen the movie The Matrix, that's kind of what we all look like. And if you can see, with the different code that we carry. And so we teach people how to treat us. We teach people how to interact with us. The thing about boundaries is that part of the reason it's so challenging is that from a very young age, we're told that when we say no, it doesn't matter and it doesn't count. Because no, you can't stick that fork in the electrical outlet. No, you cannot eat the kitty litter. No, you can't run through the halls of the mall naked. As toddlers, we have to be told no a lot, so that way we don't, jump off cliffs. So it's a very important thing, but the challenge is that it sticks in our subconscious and we don't remember that we can say no. It's also part of it is also how well it's demonstrated to us by primarily our parents. And so Brene Brown talks about this. I can send you guys the link if you want to share it. It's in one of her interviews, that some of the research that she does, she's a doctor of social work and an amazing researcher, all about heart-centered, how to be wholehearted, which, so she and I are soul sisters. We just haven't ever actually met.
Whether she knows it or not.
You're right.
The connection is real.
I lovingly joke, I'm her biggest fan. She just hasn't met me yet. So in it, one of the things she talks about is that, let's say that when someone's 2 years old, I say, I want some chocolate, and one of their parents says no, and they start throwing a tantrum, and the parent gives in. Fast forward, they're in the back of a car, they're 16, they're on a date. The guy's saying, I really want it. They have the download of the demonstration of how to say no. So just to really hit it between the eyes for a moment. Likewise, we're also not taught how to hear the word no and have it be okay. So in my office, I play a boundaries game with people constantly. I just don't explain that that's what I'm doing. But I say, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to stand here. I'm going to put my hands here. Is that okay? They can say yes or no. And if I get any sense that they're actually wanting to say no or they're uncomfortable, I will say, hey, and let's try that again. Tell me, I'm going to ask again, but tell me no, because I know that's what you actually want to say. That can be as simple as, hey, at the end of some visits, I'll say, hey, are you huggable? And most people are like, yes, I'd love a hug, especially after last year, because no one was getting enough hugs.
Right.
But I do have people who I can tell, and we all know this, like they want to say no, but they're actually saying yes because they don't want to be, and guy, girl doesn't matter.
They feel like they're being rude, right?
Right, exactly. We're taught that we can't say no to things, that we're not allowed to. And so part of the experience with boundaries that I teach is exactly that. How to say yes when you mean yes, how to say no when you mean no, how to hear the difference, and how to respond respectfully. So that's part of it. The other part of boundaries is having the boundaries of our reality. So when I talk to people who are really into expanding consciousness and energy and things like that, sometimes they get a little hesitant, like, no, I don't want boundaries. I want to be able to get up there, wherever there is, up there, Mm-hmm. Boundaries act as the container for who we are. In the same way that we have skin to hold our organs inside our bodies. So part of it is having boundaries to be able to hold the past where it belongs, the future where it belongs, giving and receiving, and source and ground, meaning the ground, like Mother Earth.
Yep.
And those different points form a axis where within the center of these boundaries and within the center of this reality is the sweet spot, which is where miracles and magic happen. I'm from Chicago, so the easiest example is Michael Jordan. That man knew how to get in the sweet spot. That's what I call it. It's where your sacred heart, present time, and balance all coincide, and where he shoots, it goes in. He shoots, it goes in. He shoots, it goes in. Or someone like Tiger Woods back in the day, where he took a little golf ball, and I just went golfing over the weekend. That's why I have this wonderful sunburn. This little this tiny little ball hits it hundreds of yards away into a coffee cup, and it goes in the hole. How the heck does that happen? There's no logical way that should be possible, because he was in the sweet spot. When you guys are in your office and serving people, when you're in the flow, and you're not even thinking anymore, it's just happening spontaneously. That's you guys being in the sweet spot. Does that make some sense?
Yeah.
And without boundaries, we will either leak our vital life force energy into any number of different areas, whether it's the past, the future, into giving too much, receiving too much, and what that looks like. Giving too much is someone who will just give you the shirt right off their back. They don't know how to they don't know how to take care of themselves. And then the other direction is someone who's receiving too much. They're like an energy vampire. Just you walk in the room and it's the wind out.
Have you seen What We Do in the Shadows?
No, but I've heard I would like it. It's by Taika Waititi, right?
You would. Vampire show, traditional vampires, they suck blood, but there's also another type called an energy vampire. And he actually works in like an insurance office. Hilarious. So good.
First off, that is the perfect office for them to work in. Yeah. Second off, I love that there is a mass media depiction of this.
Yes.
Then you can also have someone who's living too much on the ground side of their reality. And what that looks like is someone who is a ground gripper. Probably would be either atheist or agnostic. Anything that is non-physical or it cannot be measured with the scientific method doesn't exist. Yeah. The flip side of that is you get people who are living way too much into the source end of their reality, where they airy-fairy is an easy way to describe them, where they can barely drive a car, can't hold a thought in their head, can't balance a checkbook. They're just floating around in the ethers. But you need to be in harmony with both of these.
Absolutely.
And then you and I both, the three of us, all see people from the past who live in the past and the future way too much. And all of these will also have different correlations with our physical body. So someone who's stuck in the past, which is the back face of the reality, will have terrible back pain. They'll be living in wanting vengeance or feeling betrayed or enraged, or they will have something going on in the back of their head or in likewise the front. So there's correspondence to all of these things because there's a universal law of equalities, which establishes the principle as above, so below, as within, so without, which allows me that if I can change the way I hold boundaries and the way that I interact with boundaries, it will change the way my reality works. It'll change the way that my world responds to me. That was a very long answer to a relatively simple question. Was that helpful?
Oh, yeah. Same.
Good.
As far as like boundaries go, I think that I think one concept that I've been playing around with recently is that, or leaning into, is that boundaries are also, I mean, kind of what you were saying before about laws being made, so knowing the laws so you know how to break them, right? But also like boundaries, like they don't always have to be super rigid. Like they can be flexible a little bit, or like have some cushion.
Yeah, it depends on what type of boundaries we're talking about. If we're talking about the energetic boundaries that hold you together, I want them solid as Fort Knox. If we're talking about the boundaries we have with people, then yeah, it allows it to be. It needs to be a conscious decision to allow it to have a certain level of flexibility. And I'll tell you the hardest people to do this with are families and romantic partners. Just by and large, it's just the most challenging.
Mm.
Yeah, and again. So as you develop a better sense of boundaries and learn how to hold them better, doing it with your family is the real, like that's game time.
Right.
But it comes down to it can be as simple as, for the three of us, someone saying, is there anything more you can do for this care plan? Is there more? And just simply saying respectfully, no. Like that's the boundary. That is where it has to be. So I can keep the lights on. It can be as simple as that, and also allowing other people to have boundaries. And the thing about it is, the more you can hold your boundaries, and the more you allow others to cultivate theirs, the safer they will feel with you.
Mm.
We're back to that same conversation before, Gates, about either of our offices or any of our listeners who aren't chiropractors or healers of any kind, that being around you becomes a lighthouse. It's a presence that people feel safe in, and they get to be themselves.
Right.
One of the more powerful things I remember Dr. Way talking about this last year we were in Atlanta that I had never really thought of much before was the boundaries that you create with children. And even speaking on earlier, the emotional capacity that some people have, or lack thereof, creating those boundaries, like children crave boundaries because they're still so they're so receptive, right? And like they just want to understand what those boundaries are, because they want to be accepted as well. I think there's some inherent knowledge that they want to be accepted by everybody else, and boundaries are a great way for them to understand what ways they can authentically be themselves within the realm of everybody else accepting them.
Yeah.
So I think emotionally that is a huge point of emphasis for everybody listening on this. That is awesome.
When I first learned boundaries at the level that I do, at the level that I now teach, it allowed me so much more ability to grow my emotional self and process and integrate the old emotions that were still running, like those old. Okay, the way I like to describe it is like, you've got your phone and you can swipe the programs closed, you swipe the apps closed, you can actually swipe the apps closed. That's part of what chiropractic does too. It helps facilitate, and it's part of what boundaries can do, is it gives you more freedom to be able to do that more consciously and effectively. It also allows greater levels of perception to start to happen. At least from my experience.
Yeah, and with levels of perception, a lot of people think that it's associating with like expanding like horizontally, or just me have a wider perception of things, but really the greatest thing you could do would be to go deeper with it, right? With the questions you ask, or the things you seek to be knowledgeable on. Is just to go deeper with the questions, not necessarily wider.
Yeah, it's we talk about it at MLS seminars all the time, is drilling a deep well, digging a deep well,
Right.
versus being, semi-decent at 14 therapies in your office and 10 nutritional plans, and at adjusting, versus being absolutely masterful with regards to the adjustment, because of how powerful it can be for transformation, for wellness and well-being. And again, it's not necessarily a matter of right or wrong. It's just a matter of perspective and choice. There's not really a right or wrong there. It's just a matter of the choice you make and the consequences thereof.
Speaking of depth, along with that, Dr. Nash shared with me that you have taken an astronomical amount of seminars. Somewhere within the total of, I heard 100. What is the official number?
I stopped keeping track a while ago, but he's not wrong. When I was getting ready to graduate, and you guys probably will remember this for yourselves, I was feeling like, am I ready? Like, am I really ready to go there? And so an exercise that a coach of mine gave me, a wonderful soul named Lou Corletto, he recommended, calculate out how many seminars have you done and how much money have you spent, like how much are your hands worth. And so I decided to do that, and I had to figure out how to calculate it, because they're like, if I go to a Friday night talk but then go to the seminar, that's one whole thing. If I just go to the Friday night talk, I counted that. If I go to a one night adjusting workshop, I counted that. If it's a week long thing, I counted that as one. By the time I graduated, it was somewhere in the vicinity of 90. And that was in 2017. So since then, between the seminars that I've both attended and both helped facilitate and teach at, it's a little bit higher.
Gosh dang, I love it though. Yeah. I wanted to get into your mindset with that too, because not only just the calculation of up to that, but when you're going through this and everything. Because I was sharing with Dr. Nash, I was like, first of all, I don't think I've taken close to 100, but there has to be a certain level of humility that comes with that to take that many seminars, because there has to, when you go through that many things, at a certain point, you think you're pretty good at adjusting, right? But there's always that depth to be had, always that depth to grow in. So I wanted to get into that mindset of, A, keeping humility, but then B, what types of new evolution of yourself did you notice and continue to carry out with that as well?
Sure. I love the question. I love the thought process behind the question. So part of it, I think, comes from my background. My mom, when I was younger, had a couple disc herniations. And then my dad, when I was 12, had a spinal cord injury, and he had to learn how to walk from scratch at the age of 47. So I had to figure out, I learned very quickly, like, okay, my skill set, like I need my skill set to be able, not just for lack of a better phrase, rack 'em and crack 'em. Like I had to learn wanted to increase my skill set, or I chose to increase my skill set, so I'd be able to take care of, if nothing else, my parents. Or my uncle about 10 years ago had cancer, and it was, how do you work with people who have that going on? Or, how do you work with people who don't just have, and this isn't meant to be diminishing of something that can be as debilitating as headaches, and people who have intense physiological processes going on, or have had intense physiological traumas. So that was, I think, part of where it came from. My first quarter, I met a guy named Boo Bernier, who's Arnaud Bernier's son. Arnaud developed MLS. And Boo was my first student clinician. So I got spoiled in a hurry. Because at a student level, he was exceptional. Right. Like when he was a student, he had exceptional skills for that point in his evolution. And so I started learning MLS. And part of, I think, what sparked it was a woman named Sue Brown, who developed biometric integration, which is an amazing approach to chiropractic that can be a bridge between tonal, postural, and osseous models. She wanted to find, I think someone described it once as the unified theory of subluxation. How do you look at anything anyone is doing chiropractic adjustment wise and follow along and have it make sense and be able to blend any number of techniques in your art form? And she was part of who I learned that this concept that adjusting and clearing subluxations will allow a greater healing and growth to happen in terms of finishing the learning process of previous unintegrated experiences. And so part of my thought was, well, all these seminars I get adjusted by masters, so that's going to really help me I got work to do here, because I knew in myself that there was still stuff to do. Part of it was also that in my senior year of college, I had my challenge was emotional, mental, spiritual depression. And so I did counseling at the time, but I also came to chiropractic school wondering, like, man, it'd be cool if there was a chiropractic technique that could help people with that type of stuff. Not knowing that there were tons, and the chiropractic, like any chiropractic adjustment, can massively help people with that. But so I think part of it was also at the end of my first year, I got invited to come to like a student-led advanced adjusting group. And I'm looking around the room going, all righty, if I'm going to hang with these guys, I got to step it up. And I think for part of me, maybe part of my personality that I love, I found the things that I loved and followed them all the way to the soul, if that makes sense. Where it was, with MLS and BGI, it was, okay, these two things just light me up in a way that I haven't experienced before. In the way that I hear pro athletes talk about how, like, the game of basketball is to them. It just lights them up in a way that they can't fully put words into. And so I found things like that. And I found teachers like that. And then along the way, I started to find more people that I wanted to learn from. And part of it, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Marvel movie Doctor Strange. Oh, yeah. There's a scene in it. For anyone who's listening who hasn't seen it, he meets this teacher called the Ancient One, and she punches him through the dimensions, and he lands back in his body, and he's just like, "Teach me." And I laughed my butt off when I saw that, because I had that experience several times throughout school where I met people who held such a presence, and who they were facilitated so much healing, and then the way they moved and adjusted and connected, that it became I knew that was for me. And so then I learned from them as often as I could, and I just dedicated myself to that process. So part of it is being like, if you find something that is for you in that way, that lights you up and brings you home in such a way that you weren't fully sure that was possible, and people are willing to teach you, then learn. And to be fair, I had to really discipline my ego throughout that process, really discipline my personality throughout that process, because I liked what you said, Gates, of like, wanting to be real, like coming out thinking you're really good. There comes a point, regardless of the field you're in, I think especially for chiropractors, where like you like, I'm gonna get good. I want to be the best. Like, you want to be like Ash Ketchum. I want to be the very. And at a certain point, what I've noticed is I moved past that to, okay, I know I have a high level of skill. I don't want to be the best, like be the best compared to other people. I want to be the best for the people I serve.
Yeah.
Dang. Yeah.
And what is it that I need to do to be able to serve people at an exceptional level, to the point where they will go tell friends and family that, I know you've been to chiropractors before, but you haven't experienced this. And because in my opinion, there's an amazing promise that was made with chiropractic. When chiropractic was brought to the planet and to humanity, it was brought here to facilitate our healing, our evolution, and our awakening. And that's a big promise. And rather than selling it short, I'd rather, and again, in the very, like Nash said, with simplicity, tell people it, and then be able to deliver the goods.
Yep.
And and it's something that I'm continuously working on. And every day in practice, every week, I'm learning more, and I'm getting better and better and better at it. I want every single adjustment I give to be better than the last.
Yeah.
I don't back down on that.
And that's why they call it practice.
Yeah.
Not a permanent.
No.
Right.
There's so many great things that, people who are truly connected and have conviction, especially chiropractors, that they speak about, and especially referring to the adjustment being like a signature of themselves and their soul for somebody. So I truly appreciate what you said there, Doc.
Yeah.
That was good.
I heard Tim Young put it very elegantly one time. He learned it from his master teacher named Hugo Gibson. And when they were learning in school, before they would go to adjust, he would say, they'd be set up, and he would say, "Now feel it in your soul." In a South African accent that I'm not going to try and mimic, but it was feel it in your soul, lad. And I heard
Dr. Hugo, so I know exactly.
Yes, I cannot do the accent. I'm not going to try. I can kind of do Arno's, but it's a matter of that in that moment there can be a merging that happens, and a facilitation and a quickening of the energy for the person and for the person who's delivering the adjustment. Because as we bless, we are blessed. So there are several times during the day that I'll adjust somebody, and I'll take a step back from when they'll kind of look at me, and and I'll look at them like, "I think I got adjusted on that one too. Thanks so much."
Wow.
Yeah.
That truly is a level of connection that, you just, we've talked about it a little bit before too, for anybody that's listened to some of the episodes, about that connection level between not just educated, but also innately connecting with somebody. And that's a two-way street.
I cannot give more than I'm willing to receive.
Yep.
So if I have the intention of facilitating a miracle for someone, I have to also be willing to receive a miracle in my own life. If I want to give someone unconditional love, then I have to be willing to receive unconditional love in return. If I want to see them, I have to be willing to be seen. And then it becomes not a superior and inferior person interacting. It becomes a dance among equals.
Shoot.
We
take that.
Yeah.
I would drop my mic, but I just bought the thing, so I don't want to damage it.
No. We're getting close to mic drop period anyway. We got about 5 more minutes on this part 2. So one last final thought. Dr. Gates, you have anything else for?
I think real quick, I do want to touch on this because we just went over this episode of, what makes a good fighter, and in portions of this we've already kind of touched on, but I want to discuss really quickly not operating in a fear mentality. And I think a lot of students especially come up, or any individual within the public realm can resonate with that, as they're afraid to, or they're scared to not be mediocre, or not be a failing chiropractor, or not be failing in whatever they want to do. And just, especially since this past year, what has that been like for you? Maybe if you did have a little fear from COVID or whatever, or something like that, taking that to another level and not operating in a fear-based mentality, but operating in a different way.
No, I love the question. And for clarity, I will say that there were times that I was fearful, not necessarily of the disease. I mean, I had the disease in December, and I'm still alive. And but I think it was almost like, what the heck is happening in the world? And I'll talk about our body for a quick moment. Our body can operate in one of two modes, and that is either fear or in love. Or put another way, we can either be parasympathetically adaptable or sympathetically overcharged. Meaning that there is every choice we make can be every choice we make in every part of our day. We're making hundreds of choices. Are we making them out of fear or out of love? And part of it is also, and for the record, students, any students listening, I totally get the fear of like failing a class and everything. So there are occasional times where it's a little helpful to pass. But there's the two main fears when you get into practice, or for anyone who's in any particular field, especially service. One is the fear of failure, which is what Dr. Gates was alluding to. The other is fear of success, of actually being worthy to do any of this that we've been talking about for the last hour and a half. And so it's a matter of cultivating self-worth to be able to allow yourself to shine and allow yourself to share your gifts. Because if someone is coming, if Nash and Gates and I practiced next to each other, there would be different people that would come to each of us, and that's perfectly okay, because we all three have different gifts to share.
Right.
And so, with whatever you do, you can choose: am I making this choice? You can ask yourself, am I making this choice out of fear or love? Because it's one or the other. And asking yourself that simple question can really make a profound difference in who you are and how you be.
Boom.
That's perfect.
Damn. What a way to finish. Dr. Nathan, thank you so much for blessing us with your presence and dropping some serious knowledge and some potent words for everybody here today. I know you just dropped a book. I would love for you if you just kind of could let people know how they could reach out to you, or how they could get more connected with you, and what you might have come down the pipe with this next 365.
Absolutely. So I have a couple classes coming up. One is about rewriting the concepts and belief systems about health and healing. I'll send Gates and Nash the info so they can just disperse it. The book is called Letters to Our Younger Selves, A Combat Manual for Mindful Living. It's on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or BookBaby. And I may be a little biased, but I think it's pretty darn good. And the central question was, if you could write a letter through time to your younger self, what would you say? And that was what me and the two other authors all decided to focus on. And it came out really cool. So, and it's designed to be read. You can read it in like a long plane ride. You could read it over a weekend. But it's all very simple. But as Nash said, simplicity has a lot of power behind it.
Love it. Well, thank you for tuning in, good fighters. Stay tuned for what we got coming up next. We got a lot of more guests coming your way, but you know where to find us at @the_good_fight_ers on Instagram. And Dr. Gates, what's your hashtag and how they can find you?
Gatesmayor_DC.
Perfect.
Well, not my hashtag, but whatever it's called.
And mine is @Innate Life Chiro on Instagram if you'd like to follow me too.
Perfect.
Yeah, follow them.
Sweet.
Choose your destiny.